All right, welcome back. So we have now concluded our second day of Dota at the TI10 main stage, and we now have two more teams heading home. We of course had two upper bracket series today as well as two lower bracket series, and we're going to have the same thing tomorrow. However, we're going to be actually starting with the lower bracket tomorrow and then ending the day off with our two remaining upper bracket series. So getting into it, of course, today was day two. We started off with our upper bracket matchup of PSG versus T1. PSG being the first seed from the B group, and T1 being the team that they chose. They allegedly flipped a coin when they chose T1. They said that they flipped a coin on whether or not to go with T1 or OG. They went with OG, and they were the fourth seed from Group A. They, of course, just barely made it to the upper bracket. So yeah, this was a pretty anticipated series for me. I was more so excited to see how T1 would be able to handle PSG because, of course, PSG was the favorite in this matchup. And I gotta say, in the game that they won, they looked pretty convincing. It wasn't a domination win, but it was definitely a game where you could kind of see the shining parts of T1 coming through against a team as powerful as PSG. So starting off, we have game one, and yeah, this was just kind of just a classic PSG game. You know, they're playing a very comfortable draft. I believe they had the Magnus Snapfire draft. They had a carry. They had Ame on the Terrorblade. And although T1 sort of was holding on to the game for a little bit, eventually Ame's Terrorblade just got way too big. They just didn't have any more damage for it. And so just overall clean game for PSG. They take the lead in the series 1-0. We head into game two now. And T1 fixed up the draft a little bit. They went with a 23 Savage of Medusa, which is something that they probably feel a little bit more comfortable on. It's been one of his classic heroes, as it's just pretty much one of those hard carry heroes. Those seem to really be his strength. And this was a hell of a game. I won't get too much into the details, just in case you didn't see anything or didn't see this game, but I'd really recommend checking it out. This was one of those late game back and forth matches where even though T1 was leading immensely throughout most of the game, just based off of some early team fights and some early leads, as well as 23 Savage playing Medusa. You know, he's just naturally going to farm super quick. Yeah, this was a crazy game. There was one point in the game where there was a big fight in the top half of the map, and every single player in the team fight died, and then every single player in the team fight came back into the fight, but then no one died. The fight just kind of dissipated. Both teams playing super cautious, knowing that if they lose anyone at that point, that could be a win condition for the opposite team. And because that fight was so late into the game, they end up actually having a Roshan spawn pretty close after that, just a few minutes. So buyback's still on cooldown. T1 feels like they're still ahead with a decent amount, and they are. They still have a pretty considerable gold lead at this point. PSG really playing from behind. PSG tries to contest in the Roche pit, and they end up losing a few key heroes. T1 ends up securing the Aegis on 23 Savage's Medusa, and eventually they march down the mid lane and they just can't contain it anymore. T1 is just too strong, and they actually take this game, a very close game, despite the fact that the net worth was really not close at all. PSG was actually keeping this game close. So huge props to them, but at the end of the day, T1 takes the win, and they definitely deserved it. So as well as PSG played, T1 definitely deserved this win. So now we're heading into game three, and we've seen that T1 can actually beat PSG. So where's the series going to go? Well, like most series that have gone to three so far this year's TI, it has really just been the favored team just showing how dominant they can be. This was a game that was very one-sided. It ends in 37 minutes with a 31-9 kill lead. And this was just PSG just playing their comfort. So with this win, PSG clinches top six. They are, of course, joining that top six with the two other teams within the upper bracket matches yesterday, which are Team Secret and Invictus Gaming. And they will be going on to face the team that would win our next series of the day, Virtus Pro versus Vici Gaming. This was a series that I was very much looking forward to. Before that, T1 ends up dropping to the lower bracket. They drop into round two, so right after the best of ones, they're playing against, I believe they're playing against the winner of Alliance versus Beast Coast, which means that tomorrow they're going to be playing against Alliance to start the day. That's going to be our first series of the day. And yeah, so they're still secured top 12 because they started in the upper bracket, but they got to start getting it going. I would be surprised if T1 got knocked out by Alliance, but I've seen weirder things. So yeah, jumping into this next series, Virtus Pro versus Vici Gaming. Virtus Pro, of course, being the second seed from Group A, Vici Gaming being the third seed from Group B. And this was a series, honestly, even though Vici Gaming was the third seed and whatever, This was a series that I was expecting Vici to win. I think Virtus Pro notably has been struggling a lot, especially starting in the upper bracket. They had started both majors previously during the year in the upper bracket and lost immediately. It was usually against a pretty tough team, and Vici Gaming is definitely one of those tough teams. So I was just kind of expecting another series to or history to repeat itself a little bit, but Virtus Pro actually came through, and it has been such a pleasant surprise. I'm so happy to see them finally succeeding. Because they have been dominating the region for so long, they've just been having such a hard time at playing against other teams from other regions. So it did not start off super well with them, I will admit that. They start off in the first game running a carry bristleback, and it was looking pretty good for a while, but they were just having a really hard time actually getting things done. They were building some sort of lead. They were kind of having, Vici Gaming was having a hard time killing them, but they weren't really getting that into objectives, into any point where you felt like the game was over. And at a certain point, Vici Gaming just had enough damage. They had a silver edge on their carry tiny, and there was just way too much damage coming out from their end that even with a carry bristleback, they just could not withstand it on the side of Virtus Pro. And so, after a hard-fought game, Vici Gaming ends up taking that one in 39 minutes, and with a 29-16 kill advantage, they win that one on Radiant first pick. Something that I noticed a lot today, opposite to yesterday, where I mentioned that a lot of the teams were winning with second pick. We actually had a lot of first pick winning today, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I really thought the second pick was the more favorable picking order in this TI, just because you have the last pick in the second phase and the last pick in the of course overall draft. But it seems like today first pick was really the better option. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win every single time, or that first pick is the guaranteed best or whatever. Of course, some teams are just better than others, and whichever pick orientation they were on, they were probably going to win anyways. So, jumping into game 2 now, Virtus Pro one game away from being dropped down in the lower bracket. This did not seem to phase them at all, specifically GPK, who had a fantastic series. After game 1, GPK was probably the MVP for Virtus Pro. He had a crazy couple games, even on games where his picks weren't necessarily even good for the game. I believe it was in game 2 when he was playing a mid puck, and he was up against a lane counter with the Dragon Knight. He was playing against a bunch of heroes that were hard to get to, hard to burst, and he was playing out of his mind. He was really setting up a lot of great plays for his team, and yeah, overall, just MVP for GPK. He really came through with his team and helped them helped carry them that game. So they win that one in 45 minutes and 57 seconds with a kill lead of 30-18. And again, they win on Radiant first pick. Radiant first pick would win every single game in the series, and Virtus Pro would get it again for game 3. Of course, they would end up actually picking it because they were the higher seed. They actually had pick priority for the third game and the first game. And yeah, this was another fantastic game from GPK. He was on the Storm Spirit this time around, and again, just like when he was on his puck, he was just setting up kills left, right, and center. Vici Gaming was really crumbling under the pressure here, and they just did not look like they were able to handle it. And this one actually goes by quicker than the last game. And this one ends in just under 34 minutes with a total kill score of 36-14 in favor of Virtus Pro, again on Radiant first pick. Best game of the series here is just game 2. I think that this was probably the closest one. It was definitely the longest one of the series, and it was one that you can really see that GPK really had his team on his back on this one. He was playing in a lane counter. The lane was really rough too. He didn't even necessarily get super far ahead in the lane or anything. It was just based off of his plays that he was able to win this game for his team. And so now we have Virtus Pro clinching top 6, where they would play against the winner of our series before this, which is PSG LGD. And Virtus Pro traditionally has not done very well against PSG LGD at TI. Notably, these are completely different rosters from when these teams have met in the past. Besides Ame was on the team for PSG LGD at TI9, but everyone else on both teams completely different. So we'll have to see how that goes. I'm actually really excited. A lot of these big Goliath teams are clashing all the time just because of how many there are. There's so many fun series I'm looking forward to, and that's definitely one of them. And so Virtus Pro is coming into it as a second seed from Group A, and PSG LGD is coming into it from a first seed from Group B. So again, these guys have not played yet at this tournament. They're in opposite groups, but they are both the first and second place teams of their respective groups. Meanwhile, we have Vici Gaming, who drops down to round 2 of the lower bracket, where they will face against Evil Geniuses. So it does not necessarily get any easier for Vici Gaming, even though Evil Geniuses kind of had a lukewarm start. They had a pretty good showing yesterday against Elephant, another Chinese team, so we'll have to see how that one goes. Luckily, Evil Geniuses, they're out of the best of one, so it's a little bit less intense, but still, you are only 2 games away from elimination at all times in the lower bracket. Speaking of which, now looking at our lower bracket matches of the day, we had Team Spirit taking on Fnatic, Team Spirit being the 4th place seed of Group B, and Fnatic actually being in the same group. They were the 7th seed in Group B, and this is the first time on the main stage that 2 teams from the same group have actually met up to this point. And in the group stage, Team Spirit did beat Fnatic 2-0. One game was a stomp, and the other one was a little bit more even. It was a classic Fnatic game where they got themselves ahead, and they just kind of weren't able to close out the game, and Team Spirit capitalized on that and took the game out of their hands. And yeah, this series was nothing like that. This was very much more like the game that they stomped, because this was just front to back, super clean play from Team Spirit. And Fnatic just really did not have a foothold on this series at any point. It looked like at no point were they able to get any of the trades that they wanted, were able to take even the fights that they wanted, and even sometimes even get the lanes that they wanted. Team Spirit really had their number here. This was a real dominant performance. Game 1 ends in just over 25 minutes with a total kill score of 18-6. They win that one on Radiant First Pick. Once again, Radiant First Pick popping up. Game 2, Team Spirit wins it a little bit longer, but this was more just because Fnatic just would not GG out. And I don't blame them. You know, you're playing at TI. If you lose the game, you're out of TI. Everyone wants to be at TI. No matter what, you're going to play until the end because anything can happen. But man, it was a slaughter. This thing was it was ugly. Team Spirit was just beating them around. Again, Fnatic were not able to get any kills. I think they got more than half of their kills from just around the laning stage, and then past that point, it was just nothing. That game ends in just over 37 minutes. Total kill score of 31-7. So in this entire series, Fnatic only gets 13 kills, which is not even as many as Team Spirit got in a single game. And they win that one on dire second pick. So Team Spirit now secure themselves top 8. They are the first team to be moving on to the top 8 portion of the lower bracket, where they would end up facing the winner of our next and final series of the day. Meanwhile, Fnatic have officially been eliminated from TI. They finished 9th to 12th place, and they earned themselves $800,000 and $400. So at the end of the day, not a terrible win, money-wise. But of course, you know, everyone's trying to make it a little bit further than just the second round of the lower bracket. So I'm sure they're a little bit disappointed, but given that their results in the group stage, I don't think this was a huge surprise to anyone watching or anyone that was a fan or even the players themselves, maybe. So yeah, best of luck next year. Hopefully they can, stay together as a roster, work through the problems. Of course, this was a pretty new roster, so let's hope that they stick with it. And moving on to our last series of the day now, we have OG, the 3rd seed of Group B, playing against Quincy Crew, who was the 6th seed of Group B as well. So again, 2 teams. Oh, sorry, OG was in Group A. These guys have not met yet. And this was, of course, the battle of the Hassan brothers, Sumail and Yawar. And yeah, OG traditionally has done very well against these guys. Of course, these guys haven't been under the name Quincy Crew before, but they've been a relatively similar stack for a few years now. TI8, they were under VGJ. I believe it was Storm, and maybe it was Thunder, and they ended up against OG in the first round of the upper bracket where they would lose. And then at TI9, they were under Newbie, the American team for Newbie, where they would end up meeting OG again in the upper bracket first round, and they would lose again. So these guys have traditionally not done well against OG, and although it almost looked like they were going to turn that around in game 1 of this series, it did not end up turning out that way. Game 1 is a game that I definitely should have put a little star next to. I wasn't thinking about it when I did it. That was definitely a game you should check out. Quincy Crew really looked like the dominant team that they really had not looked like all the way up to this point. Even in the game that they won yesterday, that was a game that they were behind for the most part and ended up just coming back in the very end for a very intense win. A very nice win. But this was the first time that they really looked dominant past the laning stage. It wasn't rare for them to do very well in the lanes in the early part of the game, past the laning stage, but that would usually fall apart once team fighting start coming in, because I think that their team fight coordination was really what was struggling for them in this tournament. And they just looked like they had none of those struggles anymore today. That was until they started playing, until Seb's Nature's Prophet really started giving them a problem, which was the reason that they won their game yesterday against they played against Aster. Their Nature's Prophet was just creating all sorts of problems for Aster. Well, Seb's Nature's Prophet was causing all sorts of problems for Quincy Crew today. There's just every time they took a fight, they were losing objectives on the map to the point where they were severely out-killing OG, but they weren't getting a net worth lead. They weren't getting objective leads. They weren't getting map control that they should have otherwise gotten. And so this game just slowly but surely starts falling out of their hands, and it was kind of sad to see. It was definitely a team that I was rooting for Quincy Crew, just because, you know, they're from NA. So I was really pulling for them, and especially with that great showing in the first half, I was definitely hoping they would be able to close it out. But OG ends up coming back. Not to take anything away from OG, they played fantastically. Thompson, in particular, had a fantastic series. His builds have been, well, specifically on the Void Spirit game, the E-Blade build is definitely not something I would have thought of, but it really paid off for him. So he definitely had himself a series where in game 2 that definitely carried over as well with his mid Dawnbreaker. He absolutely destroyed his lane mid against Quinn on his mid Dawnbreaker, and this was just kind of a game where OG was just slapping them around. It wasn't like this at the start, despite the fact that Quincy Crew kind of got destroyed in their mid lane. Their other 2 lanes did pretty okay. Not super great. They were staying in the game for quite a bit. They were actually finding some nice pickoffs for a little while, taking some favorable trades, but eventually it just got to the point where Thompson's Dawnbreaker was just unkillable and Sumail's TA was just doing too much damage. They just could not withstand the damage, and they end up losing that one in 38 minutes and 8 seconds. So that being the last game that Quincy Crew will be playing at this year's International. They of course also did not GG out early. They played until the bitter end, and it was a very bitter end. Well, other than for Yawar, who actually in all chat typed "good luck, little bro" to Sumail, so that was kind of sweet. But yeah, at the end of the day, OG secured top 8, and they will play against Team Spirit, the other winner from this year, from today's lower bracket series. Of course, Team Spirit being the 4th place seed of Group B. These teams have not met yet, so that's going to be an exciting matchup. I'm actually very much excited for this matchup because I'm a huge fan of Team Spirit. Not a huge fan, but I've been really enjoying Team Spirit's run, and after seeing them destroy Fnatic today, I'm really excited to see how far that can go. And yeah, finally, we have Quincy Crew, who has now been eliminated from TI10. They finished 9th to 12th place, and they earned themselves, just like Fnatic, $800,000 and $400. So yeah, that was day 2 of the TI10 main stage. We have 4 more series coming up tomorrow. Of course, like I had mentioned earlier, we're starting with the lower bracket tomorrow and then ending with 2 series in the upper bracket. And yeah, I'll be sure to have a preview for tomorrow's series, as well as a review at the end of the day tomorrow as well. So be sure to not miss that and hit subscribe. And I will see you guys in just a little bit with my preview for day 3 of the TI10 main stage.